Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can see you. Are you dialing
Okay.
from Vancouver?
Yeah, I'm up in Vancouver.
There you go. I appreciate you taking the time. I really like your new album.
Thanks, Darren.
How long did it take to write all that? Like, is that years of material or is that honed in like 2 years of road tested stuff?
So I work primarily as a filmmaker. So this is about 6 years of work. But I would say in large part that's because I wasn't focusing on it as much as someone who's doing that as their main thing.
Got it. Makes sense to me. Some people have to hone it where they workshop it, pre-COVID, 5, 6 nights a week to get their tight 15, and then it's the tight 45 minute. I didn't know if you were going to tell me, well, no, I've got hours and hours of material, and this is what I felt like doing that night. I didn't know if you were going to say that.
Oh yeah, when I first started getting stuff together for the recording, the first shows ran about a little over an hour and a half. So there was definitely a whittling period that happened over the course of about 2 years, where I was working that 90 minutes down to an hour.
When you have this kind of a gig, is it a different set than say playing a college? For example, do you go like, this is my club set, this is my college set, or am I thinking that too deeply?
For me, definitely. I feel like I'm always aware of who the audience is, and I'm gonna adjust material accordingly. Sometimes on the fly. These recordings were done in Vancouver. It was a lot of folks who were really, keen to see me, who've been watching me for several years. So this was really just the stuff I was most excited about, and I didn't really have to be too concerned about who was in the audience and what they might be into because I knew they were going to dig what I was doing.
Without spoiling what it is you talk about, has there ever been any blowback from anyone related to Wolfgang Puck?
No, that's a great. I've been wondering that now as the album's getting closer to getting released. There hasn't been, but I'm curious to see. But everything I say on it is a fact. So I don't really know what kind of criticism one could have.
You're very original from where I stand, but that one bit of material reminded me a little bit of Neil Hamburger in that,
Oh, okay.
and that is intended to be a compliment. I think Neil Hamburger is the gold standard of comedy.
Oh, I love him. Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing where he says something that's a little bold or shocking, and then he backtracks and like adds onto that pile, and then even more onto that pile, and then even more, like when he does a Britney Spears joke, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was that kind of a thing. Did you know outright, hey, I want to talk about Wolfgang Puck? Or how does something like that shape up?
Well, that's a really interesting bit. I'm glad you're curious about it because that bit ends with me making a bit more of a pointed statement about how hard it is for men to ruin their careers. And I think a lot of folks might be like, oh, that's a point I want to make. So I'm gonna like that's gonna be my thesis, and I'm gonna come up with all this material to prove that. For me, it wasn't that at all. It was just that I honestly was at the airport and I saw this warning at the Wolfgang Puck like fast food joint about food poisoning. And I was just so baffled as to why that was on the menu. And that's where it started from. And, the more I thought about it, the more I read about it, the more I talked about it on stage. I just really enjoyed, diving into how ridiculous that seemed to me. And it was probably only after performing that for about 2 years that I then realized, like, oh, this is actually yet another example of a guy who's made some pretty big mistakes in his career and somehow still seems to, keep doing what he's doing, and no one questions his professionalism. And so I really arrived at that point after a couple of years of just having fun making jokes about how ridiculous that warning on the menu is.
I can't top that. I really appreciate that. And another compliment to you, because I guess this is the compliment hour, is since you have this very unique delivery where you take your time making a point and it's relaxed. Did you have at the beginning other comedians, or entertainment professionals who are going, hey, you can't do that. You have to bring the energy up? Or did you outright know, hey, Stephen Wright could do it and he did just fine. And a lot of other people like Emo Phillips, they have their own rhythm and they're going to be fine. So I can do it.
Totally. I would say Stephen Wright is a hero of mine since I was a kid. And um, maybe even more so was the Jack Handy segments on SNL.
Yeah.
That was my favorite stuff on Saturday Night Live. You know, of course, I love Chris Farley, but at that time, you know, everyone I went to high school with was all about Chris Farley. But I really loved that weird kind of slow monologue vibe of the Jack Handy segments. And it's also just my natural way of being that it's hard for me to be super high energy. I don't do a lot of act outs. And I think I might have felt pressure to do that more early on. But over the years, what I've found is that because so many folks bring that kind of energy, and it's not a criticism. I love plenty of, you know, high octane comedy. But because a lot of folks bring that energy, often when I'm on a show, my energy will sort of be the odd one out. And it actually often brings the audience in, because when I come up and I'm just speaking more slowly and, you know, not being as loud, it seems to often get audiences to lean in. Not to say that there aren't hecklers every once in a while. Actually, there was a heckler at the album recording we had to kick out of the show. But yeah, so I found it's worked to my advantage over the years. Yeah.
I'm not assuming that you're a fan of professional wrestling, but this is something that correlates to what you just said. Did you ever hear of a wrestler named Jake the Snake Roberts?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay, Jake the Snake Roberts is really famous for the promos or the speeches or the interviews that he did hyping up matches. And I once heard him talking about why he was popular in that end. And he explained he spoke softer than anybody so that you would actually have to make the effort to listen to it, because everyone else was trying to keep everything at 10. They were trying to be as loud as possible. And he was going, you know, well, what I'm going to do. And so you'd go, wait, I'm going to drop what I'm doing to actually listen. That kind of reminds you of your approach to it. That sure, there might be a heckler or two, but to 99% of the people, they're going to have to go, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone because I don't want to miss a word of this. So you were doing this from day one?
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, first of all, thank you for the for the comparison to Jake the Snake. That's the first time that's ever happened. But yeah, to me, it's I guess it's a very similar thing. I find that, you know, people tend to lean in when you're being a bit more quiet. And I also did some clown training many years ago. And
really,
yeah, one of the fundamental things I learned there was that a lot of performers concern themselves with trying to be interesting. And the teaching I got was that it's more important to be interested. And so I'm not concerned so much with making my delivery interesting as I am with just being interested in what I'm talking about. And I find if I'm really interested in what I'm talking about, and even if I'm quieter, that the audience often connects with that. Yeah, it seems to work. But I didn't know the Jake the Snake thing. I love that. I'm gonna make note of that.
So when they say, so who are your influences? You go, well, Stephen Wright and Jake the Snake Roberts.
Yeah. Well, he also had he had a snake. He had an animal. So I definitely loved that about his whole wrestling routine. And there was a certain mystery about it, right? You knew that the snake was going to come out at a certain point, and he kind of dangled that there. It's like that's a bit like a lot of my bits too, right? It's like you kind of know what's coming, and you're still just waiting for it to happen. And I have a lot of material like that too. Interesting.
The other side of that, thinking about that for a second, in that era, a lot of professional wrestlers had an animal that they brought with them to the ring. And I can imagine the anxiety of that, because you're like, I got to remember how to do all these moves without getting hurt and make sure the crowd's not bored. At the same time, make sure that this animal's not defecating within 5 feet. Like that's an extra anxiety thing. Like, and I'm also wearing next to no clothing, so they're looking at me funny. I just don't know how you manage all that at once. Like that's two more things that you really have to worry about when you're on stage. There's no animal.
Yeah,
You're
much bigger crowd. And you know for sure half the crowd's probably going to hate you. So yeah, there's a lot of things to give me anxiety. That's probably why I'm not a wrestler. I mean, there's a number of reasons why I'm not a wrestler, but
Fair. Well, hey, back to you here. Arts and Crafts is putting out the album. If I've done my research correctly, it's the first non-music comedy specific album they've done. Did you know the people at Arts and Crafts for years?
I did. So about 11 years ago, I had directed a music video for one of their artists, Dan Mangan. And that's really where the relationship started. And then eventually someone I knew in the marketing department had this idea. This was back almost 7 or 8 years ago, had this idea to try putting out a comedy album. And so they approached me with that and we sort of went from there. But as I said, my main job is working in film, so it just really took my time with getting all this material ready and getting it to a place that I was really proud of it.
Well, Arts and Crafts, though, is really cool label. There's there's not a lot of rock labels. I consider a rock label, even if it is, singer songwritery at times, but there's not a lot of cool labels that are willing to take that chance on comedy. Did you know right away, hey, this is the label for me? Or did they go, hey, if you ever have an album, we're the home for it?
Yeah, I felt excited about it right away. I think in part because of just the other artists that were on the roster there, and there was a lot of music there that I admired, and I felt like at the very least they knew something about introducing those Canadian artists mostly to the world through independent releases, and so that really seemed like a body of work and like some institutional wisdom that they had that I could really benefit from and learn from. And it's proven to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few times, well, my real day job is as a filmmaker, and that's that great Borat credit, which something I'm curious about with that. How long did you have to keep it a secret that there was another Borat movie being made?
It was about 16 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big secret to keep. Because I mean, I moved, so I moved from Vancouver to LA to work on the production. So, and my wife came with me. She quit her job, so a lot of people we knew that we worked with were really wondering what was up, and we had to just keep it a secret the whole time. It's almost like becoming a spy or something. Like you kind of live this secret life for, I mean, at least for the 60 months, and then we could tell people what we were doing down there.
What was the timeline of working on that versus when the storm fades? Because not that far apart in terms of releases, but sometimes somebody can work on a film for 6 years and then it doesn't come out for 3 years.
Yeah, so you nailed it right there. So when the Storm Fades was actually its festival tour back in 2018, and then it just took us, I guess, a little over 2 years to get it the full digital distribution that we wanted. So they did come out around the same time, but when the Storm Fades was completed, 2 years earlier.
Hmm. So there's that. Then this stand-up album is a 2021. But if somebody's really lazy and they just look at your IMDb page, they might go, so he's done nothing in 2021, that kind of a thing. It's some of the discography is here, some of the filmography is kind of there. Do you have a lot in the works right now?
I do actually have another feature film in post production that we're hoping will come out in early 2022. So that's largely what I'm focused on right now, and I haven't done any stand up during the pandemic. So once I'm fully vaccinated, I'm excited to start working on a new album. So that's going to be the next year or so, finishing that movie and hopefully starting to get some new material together.
That was actually going to be my next question. If you dipped your toes in the water, because if you ask 10 different stand-ups, how much comedy did you do over the pandemic? You're going to get the, I haven't done it in 16 months. You're going to get the, well, I did gigs in Texas and Florida, the place to
Right.
relax. You get the people who say, well, I did a weekly live stream. You didn't see it.
Yeah, right.
And then you get the, well, 1 weekend a month instead of 4. So not at all cold turkey for you.
Yeah, it was just cold turkey. And to be honest, it was in part because of the work on Borat, which is a pretty long, hard production to work on. And so once that was done, I was already kind of looking forward to just having some downtime. And not to say that the pandemic was downtime. It was much more horrific for the world than that. But
Right.
I just embraced the chance to, not be performing and just focus on writing and editing and stuff like that.
You just made a really good point without realizing it. Anytime you say that good things happened over the pandemic period, you have to be almost apologetic in a way. Like
Yeah.
there's this fear of getting canceled of, well, I was able to save some money because I worked steadily and I was creative.
Yeah.
I wrote really good material and
Yeah.
I reconnected with family and I got my health insurance. Oh, but I mean, it was a catastrophe for the world. Like, you feel
Yes. Yeah.
bad if you improved your life at all during those 14, 15 months.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things for me was it was actually pretty great for my mental health. Like just getting to focus on myself. I started doing a lot more therapy than I had been doing. And, I took some great steps for me during that time. And so, um, yeah, I obviously try to couch that within understanding that, it's been a really terrible experience for lots and lots of people for very, very obvious reasons, but clearly not for everyone.
Yeah, but again, you have to be careful. Oh, life was good. No, wait, wait, no, it wasn't. No, it was the worst, right?
Yes.
2020, I tell you. I mean,
Yeah.
I look back at my 2020, I say that turned out to be one of my most productive years because that gave me a chance to do a life reboot. In your case,
Cool. Okay.
you actually had art come out that you could be proud of. You helmed art, which you will be proud of when it comes out in the future. So hopefully we start to see as time passes on that people can be a little more positive about, I know the world sucked, but mine didn't, maybe, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I seen some of what's called America's Got Talent this new season where they're saying that because everyone was sort of in hiding for over a year, they feel like it's going to be the best season they've ever done because everyone was practicing their, obscure talent for a year nonstop. And yeah, some of it seems to be the case. So I think artistically, I think there's going to be definitely a period of some really interesting stuff coming out.
The other weird theory that I have, and if you don't want to address this, you just say, Darren, next topic, move on, buy my
Okay.
album, is I've been doing as somebody who tapes interviews 5, 6 days a week, I'll be asking people, hey, so when did you film this? And they more often than not say, well, we filmed it during the pandemic and everything was safe and everything is wonderful. And then after you do the next one, you hear, we filmed it during the pandemic. And you go, was everyone working, but just keeping it so quiet that they were working, that they were under these crazy NDAs because they didn't want to get any blowback?
Yeah, I mean, I was working on editing my own film, so
Yeah.
that's like pretty solitary COVID safe work. But Borat did continue production through COVID. Obviously, if you've seen the film, they kind of just turned it into part of the narrative of the film. And so yeah, I think there was quite a bit of work happening during COVID, at least that I was hearing about.
It's just no one wanted to admit publicly that they were sheltered in at home. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think, well, and I think for some folks, it was they were breaking new ground, right? Like
Mhm.
they weren't sure, these some of these productions weren't sure how's it going to turn out. So I think no one wanted to celebrate too early. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Well, back to you. You got this album. You've got summarizing what I've learned. The album, there can be another album. There will be more stand up. You just have to fit it in between making films, political activism. I didn't ask you about that. I'm sure there's a lot to be active about at the moment.
Yeah, right.
Any particular causes or things you're focused on at the moment that people should be paying attention to?
Well, I think you hear quite a bit of it on the album. I think I definitely try to encourage people to check the album out, and I don't consider it political comedy. Maybe that's just because I think that label brings a certain kind of comedy to mind that's really sort of loud, angry, and ranty, and my stuff is quite different than that. So I think a lot of things I'm concerned about, you hear about them on the album. Something that's gotten more serious, unfortunately, since I recorded the album is the anti-Asian hate and violence, including in Vancouver, where I live, which has actually become the anti-Asian hate crime capital of North America statistically. And so I just think we're at a time where, yeah, it's worth checking out some voices and perspectives that if you haven't heard from folks like that before, maybe give it a listen or go watch that movie and see if that expands some of your perspective.
I can't top that one either. Two non sequitur questions, and then you're a free man. And they're about you. And the first one is, who's the best band of all time, or at least your favorite band?
Wow, what a question. The best band of all time.
I figure being, now that you're on a record label,
Yeah,
music's going to
yeah.
come up in a lot of interviews where they say he gives his top 5 albums of the year. Might want to have a
Yeah.
cheat sheet ready for half your interviews now.
Yeah, no, this is a great. I mean, there's just a lot of things that come to mind, so I feel like I gotta choose carefully. Um, I'm gonna go with a pretty obvious one, or maybe not. I'm gonna say Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Hmm.
And there's actually some inspiration I've taken from like classic roots reggae in my comedy, which is that I love how that, old reggae, they can lyrically talk about anything. It could be, an intimate love song. It could be just talking about how great it is to smoke weed. Um, and it can also just be revolutionary politics, talking about like armed revolt and, really dramatic political stuff like that. But the thing that gets me about it is they'll be able to cover all those themes and often keep it sonically in this really chill, kind of relaxing, calm space for you as a listener. And that's something that I was sort of aspiring to in my comedy. And little known fact about Bob Marley and the Wailers is before they transitioned into becoming the reggae group that is now maybe the most famous reggae group of all time. They were actually originally like a doo-wop group. Their early stuff, they were like fully in the 3-piece suits and kind of doing the doo-wop, like Motown type stuff before they really found their reggae sound. But so yeah, I think that'll be my vote. Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Good pick. I think George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic were also a doo-wop band before that.
Oh, cool. Okay.
James Brown and the Flames, the Blue Flames, I forget what they were called. They were that too. I likened it to when you find out that Alice in Chains was a hair band before they were grunge.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All the grunge bands were hair bands first. So I guess every band from a certain point had to have been a Motown band first. Like when you find out that Neil Young was in a band with Rick James that was signed to Motown.
I didn't know that. Wow. Neil Young was in a band with Rick James. Cool.
Called the Minor Birds. And I think they were signed, but they had to give up the record deal because Rick James was AWOL from Vietnam or something. But
Wow. Okay. I had no idea. I got to find some of that.
so I guess any great artist you ever find out what they did first, because
Yeah.
maybe it
Yeah.
wasn't as good.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's fun to see, how they evolved and stuff. Yeah.
And then the last question I've got for you is, besides checking out Airports and Animals, which technically not a TV show or a movie, what's a TV show that we should be watching if we need a new show to start?
Oh, wow. What have I been watching recently? Actually, I just recently watched, I was a bit late to this one, but I just watched Ted Lasso, which I really enjoyed that. It was a refreshingly just gentle comedy. There was kind of no hard edges on it. So if you're looking for something to relax and laugh to, that show is great. And I think season 2 is actually coming out this month.
And as a result of working on Borat, something like that, have you been lured more in the comedy direction? Like, will we be seeing you do more punch up on things by default because you have the Borat credit?
I certainly hope so. Nothing big I can talk about yet, but definitely chasing as many opportunities as possible and always looking to write jokes. So if anyone watching this wants to hire me to write some jokes, please reach out.
Well, looking forward to seeing you live in New York when touring and all that happens for you. But in the meantime, congratulations on a great, honest, original comedy voice of an album right there.
Oh, thanks so much, Darren. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Keep up the greatness there. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Paltrocast.